Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we take a closer look at the top political stories of the day. Ballotpedia connects people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed. I'm Frank Festa, the producer of On the Ballot, filling in for our host, Victoria Rose. Thanks for being with us. Today, I'm joined by Ballotpedia's very own Juan Garcia de Paredes to take a look at the accelerating rate at which members of Congress are deciding not to run for re-election in 2024. Juan, thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, yeah. How was your year starting off?
It's pretty good. I spent the holidays with my family, did a bit of traveling during the break. It was pretty relaxing overall. How about yours?
No, it's been good so far. Definitely a little rough, getting back into the swing of things. I think it always is for most of us, but happy to be, back at work again. Saw a lot of family. It was good, but yeah, excited to dig into it. Excited for the year here at On the Ballot.
That's great. Yeah.
Let's jump right into it. As of January 8th, 43 members of Congress announced that they would not be seeking re-election this year. 7 members of the U.S. Senate and 36 members of the U.S. House. It's the most congressional incumbents that have decided to retire at this point in any of the last 4 cycles, all the way back to 2018. So, Juan, how big of a difference are we actually talking about here when we're comparing this cycle to prior cycles?
It's not a huge difference in comparison to recent cycles. So we're recording this on January 8th, and according to our records by this time in 2022, 41 members of Congress had announced their retirements at this point. 37 had announced their retirements, and I should say that they were not seeking re-election, not their retirements, in 2020, and 39 had announced that they were not seeking re-election in 2018. So as you can see, the pace is slightly above recent trends, but it's not necessarily, the difference here is not necessarily huge. Broken down by chamber, 36 House members have announced they will not seek re-election in 2024. That's 2 more than the 34 who had announced they were not running for re-election at this point in 2022. 3 more than the 33 who had announced at this point in 2020. And the same number, actually, as those who had announced at this point in 2018. In the Senate, the difference is a little bit starker, I would say. So, as I said, 7 senators have announced that they're not running this year. When compared to the past 3 cycles, there were 6 Senate retirements total in 2022, 4 at this point in 2020, and 3 at this point in 2018. So actually, it's not necessarily a huge difference, but I don't want to stress that too much simply because it is, in fact, the most retirements we have seen going back to at least 2000. So it's on the high side, I guess. It's just not necessarily a big difference, perhaps.
There's been a pretty noteworthy wave of announcements over the last 2 months. 11 Congress members announced they wouldn't seek re-election since November 15th, which is already 2 months ago, which is hard to believe. But what do you think is behind this recent surge?
So I think there are several reasons. One big factor, I think, is that candidate filing deadlines are coming up in many states, and they have actually already passed in some states. So, for example, in California, the filing deadline was December 8th, and we actually had 2 members from California announce that they were not seeking re-election in late November. North Carolina had its candidate filing deadline passed on December 15. We had 3 members from North Carolina announced that they were not seeking re-election in the weeks and days ahead of that deadline. And also in Texas, the filing deadline was December 11. And we also had a couple of Texas members announced that they were not seeking re-election close to that date. So that's, I think, a big factor. Overall, I would say, 9 of 11 U.S. House members who announced they will not seek re-election since November 15 are retiring from public office. So, if you're a member on the fence who's, you haven't necessarily made your mind about running for re-election or maybe running for another office, the candidate filing deadline is basically, when you have to make that decision. Just to go over, though, the list of House members who have announced since November 15. So we have Representative Dan Kildee is from Michigan is not running. Representative Tony Cardenas and Ana Eshu from California have also announced that they are not running. Representative Kathy Manning, Wiley Nickel, and Patrick McHenry from North Carolina have announced that they're not running. And Rep. Drew Ferguson from Georgia, Blaine Luetkemeyer from Missouri, and Doug Lamborn, Republican from Colorado, have all announced that they are retiring from public office. There's one member who announced that he is running for a U.S. Senate seat in Utah, currently held by Mitt Romney. That is John Curtis. And then you have Representative Dean Phillips from Minnesota, who is running in the Democratic primary for U.S. president. So those are kind of like the folks who have announced that they are not running since November 2015. So as you can see, there's a lot of retirements in there, and just two members who are running for another office.
Got you. Well, how about more generally overall, maybe in each chamber, how you just broke it down there for us? What's the story with the senators that are not running for reelection?
Sure. So the story in the Senate is mainly one of retirements, and it kind of makes sense. You know, the median age of a U.S. senator is around 65 or 66. So there you have 7 senators who are retiring, 6 of them who are not seeking reelection. 6 of them are retiring from public office. Only one, Senator Mike Braun from Indiana, is running for another office. He's running for governor. Of the 6 senators who are retiring, all but one are over 70. So I would have to think that, you know, age and length of tenure probably is a factor in their decisions. The one senator who is not over 70 of those who are retiring is Senator LaFonsa Butler, and she's kind of a special case because she was appointed earlier this year to fill the seat of California Senator Dianne Feinstein, who passed away earlier this year, and she was in her 90s. So the story in the Senate, I would say, is one of, you know, retirements, mostly from members who are on the older side and in some cases have served for several terms.
Got it. So a lot of retirements in the Senate. How about in the House?
The picture in the House is a little bit more mixed. So of the 36 U.S. House members who are not seeking re-election, 20 are retiring from public office, and that is pretty evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. So 10 Democrats are retiring, and 10 Republicans are retiring. There is a difference in the number of House members who are not seeking re-election next year because they're running for another office, specifically the U.S. Senate. We have 9 Democrats who are running for the U.S. Senate and 3 Republicans who are, and that is largely a product of the number of Democratic senators who are retiring versus the number of Republican senators who are retiring. So 5 Democratic senators are retiring for public office, and 2 Republican ones are. So it makes sense that more Democratic House members are running for the Senate than Republican House members. Beyond those, there are 2 members from North Carolina, Democrat Jeff Jackson and Republican Dan Bishop, who are running for the state attorney general. 1 Democrat, Abigail Spanberger, is running for governor of Virginia. And then there is, as I said, 1 Democrat running for president of the United States, Dean Phillips, Democrat from Minnesota.
Makes sense. So there were a lot of themes there among the different chambers. Looking out more broadly at the media landscape, some reporting out there has pointed to dissatisfaction with how politics and the political process have been working these last few years as a major driving force behind these members of Congress deciding not to seek re-election. Do you think that there's more to the story there, or is that what we're seeing as well on our end?
I think there is some truth to that notion. Some members have definitely expressed dissatisfaction dissatisfaction with the political process in their retirement announcements. Ken Buck, Republican from Colorado, for example, he mentioned that he was frustrated with his colleagues in his announcement. Others like Earl Blumenauer, Democrat from Oregon, and Debbie Lesko, Republican from Arizona, also expressed a general sense of dissatisfaction with how the state of affairs in the chamber recently. So I think that is definitely true for some members. Whether that is true for most members, it's another question, right? So, for example, Patrick McHenry is a Republican from North Carolina who served as interim House Speaker earlier this year. So he is retiring as well. And in his retirement announcement, he said that concerns about the future of the institution are kind of basically exaggerated, and that he kind of hinted like everything will be okay. Just to give you another example, CBS reported recently that they asked Representative Anna Eshoo, when she was asked whether she was leaving because of the current environment in Congress, she said that wasn't really the case for her. It was just time for her to retire. So I think for some folks, they definitely do feel that way about how, the environment in Congress right now is. But I think for a lot of other members, the reasons for them not seeking reelection are, of a different nature. There's a number of members who have been serving for a while. Grace Napolitano, for example, is another member who is retiring. She is 87, oldest sitting member. She's served for 25 years. So age and length of tenure probably plays a role as well. Other members have cited health concerns. Jennifer Wexton, Democrat from Virginia, has a condition that makes it harder for her to serve in Congress. She cited that in her retirement announcement. And yeah, so I think it's definitely true for some members, but perhaps not for most, or not for all of them.
Is there a deadline when candidates have until to announce they'll be not seeking re-election, or can they do it all the way up until the election? So I'd imagine there's some sort of time frame here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So generally speaking, incumbents who are thinking about announcing that they're not running, they need to make their minds before the candidate filing deadline takes place in their state. Okay. In order to have their name printed on an election ballot, them and every congressional candidate must file their required paperwork ahead of that deadline. So, those also vary from state to state. So depending on which state a member represents, that is kind of like the hard deadline that they bump against when they need to make that decision. And this deadlines, the dates for these deadlines vary a lot. So some states like California, North Carolina, as I said, had their filing deadlines in December. They've already passed. Others will have them as late as September of this year. So depending, on which state we're talking about, the time frame for these members to make that decision varies.
Yeah, September's a long time from now, so we'll definitely see some more, it's safe to say, between now and then, right?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, we should be seeing some more retirements right about now, since January is historically the month where we've seen the most retirements, at least in recent cycles.
My last question there, Juan, would be maybe to look into your crystal ball for us if you can. Are there any particularly noteworthy Congress members on our radar that we might suspect of seeking to not try to retain their seat?
That's a good question. I think on the Senate side, there's been a lot of speculation about Senator Kyrsten Sinema's intentions. So she's an independent from Arizona. She hasn't publicly announced yet whether she will run for re-election. Also, as I'm sure most of our listeners know, Sinema was a Democratic senator until late 2022 when she changed her partisan affiliation to independent. If she does run for re-election as an independent, there has been some polling out that suggested she would have a relatively tough race. She would likely face two major party candidates. And in fact, on the Democratic side, one House incumbent who isn't seeking re-election in 2024, Representative Ruben Gallego, is not seeking re-election because he is running in the Democratic primary for Sinema's seat. So that is one incumbent that folks are keeping an eye on. Another Senate incumbent that observers are watching is Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey. So he is currently facing federal charges related to a bribery case. He hasn't officially announced his plans yet, but the Democratic primary for that Senate seat has already drawn a number of high-profile candidates, including, again, another retiring representative, Andy Kim. So that's another incumbent to watch in the Senate. Then on the House side, that is a bit trickier. Those announcements tend to come out of left field. I would say one representative we're keeping an eye on is Montana Republican Matt Rosendale. So he has strongly hinted, to put it mildly, that he is interested in running for the U.S. Senate seat currently held by Democratic Senator John Tester. He hasn't officially said that he is going to run, but in a video he released earlier this year, he basically all but said he was going to. So that is another member that we would keep an eye on.
So I guess we're going to have to wait and see there, huh? There's still a lot of time left between now and then. So Juan, we'll have to have you back on the show to give us an update in a couple months.
Thank you. No, that was great.
Yep. Thanks again for your time. And then for our listeners, you can learn more about our election coverage at the link in our show notes. We'll be back next week with another episode. Make sure you subscribe to On the Ballot wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Frank Festa, and thanks for listening.